2006, my music history lectures at the City College of Chicago were invaded by an army of smartphones. It was like the movie Red Dawn when the Soviets landed in Colorado, but instead of soldiers, they sent smartphones into my classroom to interrupt and disrupt the attention span of an entire generation. One by one, I lost my students to texting, emails, and the dark leader of all teenagers, Facebook. But nothing prepared me for phones with Wikipedia. For the first time in history, teenagers who know everything now had a phone that knows everything. So I overhauled my class and my teaching style. How could I use their phones against them? I learned to create videos, apps, and digital research problems that were disruptive. But that's not what's bothering you right now. Maybe this problem you're having right now could help the 50% of high school dropouts who said they're bored. Because right now you're experiencing an information gap. A missing piece of the sensory experience has not yet been explained. In India, there's a god called Ganesh. He's the remover of obstacles, the god of new beginnings. The elephant in the room we're not talking about. The elephant that fixes education, the elephant that doesn't forget, is curiosity. You can't teach without curiosity. I'd like to talk to you today about fixing education by addressing curiosity and believing that it starts at the beginning of when we're learning. Recent cognitive research shows that we remember what we think about, not what I'm teaching. In a sense, it doesn't matter what I teach. It only matters what you're thinking about. How do we get through to students in an age of too much information, in an age of information overload, in an age of choices of devices? I'd like to talk about fixing curiosity in your office, where it's proven by the Journal of Organizational Research to be a leading indicator in your performance and how much you enjoy your job. You know when you've lost curiosity, somebody's crushed your curiosity on a project, how that affected you. And in school, where I feel like standardized testing are straining curiosity to the limits of human capacity. It started in 2001. We ramped up standardized testing to improve our testing scores in reading, writing, and mathematics. But by 2006, we had dropped from 18th in the world to 31st in math. At the same time, Finland spent $0 on standardized testing, but was the #1 country in education for 6 years in a row. But they have a lot more advanced teacher training. They put their money in a different place. By 2010, the state of Florida, we spent $254 million for a standardized test written by an overseas company. And I'd like to rethink the pessimism that we can't fix our own education system. I want to rethink the idea of compliance, that we have to find out who's doing something wrong in the system. And because I don't believe that's what's going on in school. I don't know those kids. I don't know those teachers or administrators who come to work to do a bad job. I think we need to adjust the system. And it comes back to curiosity. Are we designing experiences that draw people in? We don't think of curiosity as movable usually, but research shows that it exists like a cliff on the edge of what we know. If a question is too easy or too hard, we fall off the cliff or look backwards. If we know too much, it's not interesting, right? If I ask you, what are the 3 colors of a traffic light? It's not a very interesting question, right? Your curiosity disappears. If I ask you, well, how many traffic lights are there in Jacksonville? That's not a very interesting question either because it's too hard. But if I asked you, how many traffic lights did you drive through on the way here today? That's something you can get to. And I know right now I can see you thinking about traffic lights. You count 1, 2, 3. I'd like to think about using those in education, creating experiences where people are curious. Some of the people that use curiosity the best aren't in education. They're web advertisers. Some of these headlines always caught my attention. They use curiosity against us because they give us information we're familiar with, but they break it into pieces, and they take a piece out, and then we see these headlines, and we're kind of drawn in to click. Here's one of my favorites: 7 puppies die after an American Airlines flight. Oh my God, what's going on in this world? How did this happen? It's a curiosity trap to get you to engage, to click, 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 find out what's going on. 15% changes everything. Oh my God, what is he talking about? Is it the 15% that I have? Is it 15% coupon? What Hugo Chavez teaches us about Twitter. I thought Hugo Chavez was dead. What is he doing from the grave with Twitter? So all these examples use curiosity. They use it against us to inspire us to click. They were first recognized, information gaps, by George Lowenstein in 1994 as information gaps or curiosity instigators. The beauty is when your brain knows what it doesn't know. When you know what you don't know, you're much more interested. Imagine trying to teach somebody. For me, the difference is right here. Teaching people what they don't know is very different than what I want to do, which is teach people what they know that they don't know. The amazing influence of curiosity is that our level of curiosity vertically is sort of the exact same as what we get to keep afterwards. We remember at the level of our curiosity. If we're not very curious, guess what? Doesn't matter. We don't learn very much. In this next example, I designed an information gap. I created this video. I didn't have any video training. I just learned to create videos as a teacher with my phone. What does this video have to do with Vivaldi's music? Draw you into the themes of the music, but leave you a little bit curious, a little bit confused, to put the puzzle together. There's more we could talk about right now, and you could all have different feedback about that video. It's a very different experience than the traditional education video where you're just presented with information and it's like, here, absorb that. No thanks. If we don't have something to do, we don't participate. Additionally, we're most curious when we defragment our hard drive. When we expect something to happen and it doesn't happen. When we thought we knew what was going to happen. That's why it's so important to be wrong. Because after we're wrong, that's when we learn the most. That's when we're really engaged. Like, when you play bar trivia and you get it wrong, what do? Oh, man, let me see what's going on here. How did that happen? For example, if I asked you, who's the first president of the United States? Everybody would say, it's George Washington, because that's a known fact, right? But I can make the argument with curiosity that Warren G. Harding is actually the first president. Why? Because half of all people couldn't vote until Harding's election. So now your brain will save curiosity. You'll save Warren G. Harding for a little while in long-term memory. And this is his only chance. Mona Lisa's expression is a classic curiosity trap, and it's drawn us in for hundreds of years. If our brain recognizes a smile or a frown, we assign an emotion and move on. But because we can't really determine what she's thinking, because we don't know for sure, that makes us curious. Well, what's the danger of not being curious? If I'm not learning, I'm sitting still while the world changes around me. Every book you read isn't just a book. It's like a star of knowledge, and it blows up and connects to every other book you've read. And when we see each other 20 years later, and I haven't been reading, everything you've read has been expanding exponentially in all directions, connecting to everything you read before. When we see each other again at that 20-year reunion, it seems like I'm still the same because I wasn't reading. I was playing Candy Crush and video games, right? But you've been growing, and you seem very different now. So how do we use this in education? I'd like you to get your phones out. This is what I do in class. This is the way I'm sort of trying to turn the system around. How dare you take your phones out in class, right? Could somebody tell me, we'll have a little Google race, as I call it, a little Google race. I know who's got the fastest thumbs. Could somebody tell me what Beethoven has to do with the fall of the Berlin Wall? Just Google Beethoven and the Berlin Wall. I also realized is maybe if I use their phones in class, maybe they'll be tired of them when they come home to dinner with you. Oh, I'm so tired of working on my phone at school. Mom, I just want to talk. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
The performance of the night is by an international orchestra gathered to celebrate the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Thank you. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which I didn't mention, was played at the fall of the Berlin Wall. Here was my response to this situation. What if I tear that page about Beethoven out of the book, and every day in class, we're going to build the story. We're going to build people. We're going to build history. We're going to enjoy the process because we're participating. The other beauty of it is that our memory loves breadcrumbs. We love something to hold on to get back to information. It's not just information. And when I put it in front of you in a textbook, it's not asking you to remember how you got there. So I created my process called interactive listening. I realized my new job was to create puzzles and to curate the conversation. I still have to sort of harvest the information in class, but 30 people are now discovering what Beethoven has to do with the Berlin Wall, and I was sort of the final judge of that, almost like a DJ, mixing 30 tracks of teenagers. Some of the statistics about education now should shock you and encourage you to think about the future of what we can be doing as teachers. 80% of teachers said students are overwhelmed by the amount of information available to them in a Pew Research poll of 2,400 teachers. At the same time, 87% of teachers said that they use Wikipedia for background research, even though it's often banned in school, and cites great sources often at the bottom of a page. But the last statistic should shock you, because 91% of teachers agreed on something. And that in itself is amazing. If you've ever been to a faculty meeting, the diversity of our ideas is our strength. When 91% of teachers said the most important skill for students in the future is judging the quality of information. So why don't we start that now? It's an idea of building from a blueprint of where the teacher is the skeleton. The teacher writes great questions that draw you in, questions that are mysterious, questions that don't have simple answers. And the students fill in the building. They fill in the structure. When I started, I felt really alone. I worked on this for 4 years in the basement, and it was against a lot of the way things are. But a couple years later, I worked with a great teacher, Brian Felix, and helped me put my ideas together. And Apple called and said, congratulations, you're the #1 iBook out of 22,000 books. We beat Rachel Ray, which was great. And United Nations School in New York called because they're using it. I had designed it for kids that the system didn't work for in the city, but it was being used by the international baccalaureate programs around the world because it challenged them to think differently and to be responsible for what they're learning and to build their own education, because I think when you get out of school, that's one of the things where every kid's going to face now. How do I keep learning? How do I build a future for myself? It's not the same world we used to be in. And every teacher I know is pulling their hair out because they have to jump up and down to make the content exciting. They have to make people excited about a frozen dinner. Take this information over here and put it over here. And our books are a lot like that. It hasn't changed much in 50 years. The content's kind of mysterious. And it's been making promises, but it hasn't adapted to our new world. I think we want our students to come home from school creative and curious. We want them to come home. But we don't think of those things growing on teachers. We think about our system and unleashing teachers' creativity to design their own type of methods, their own ways to teach, using media, but expressing themselves. Everything I did was a personal expression of who I was as a person. The last thing we need to really build curiosity is awe, something amazing. And it's proven to create openness to learning for up to 2 weeks after a great field trip. When you experience an awe-inspiring view of a landscape or a gymnast or a musician, you see yourself differently. We connect to each other. Our sort of self-image becomes less important. And after an amazing event, we're more likely to help each other. I wanted to use awe to compete in the rhythm and the world that we live in the world of digital graphics. I think education has to be as good as everything else that's out there. It can't be the boring part of the day. So here's how I teach rhythm. It has a cycling, visual look at rhythm, and it still has the definitions that I wanted to get through, but it's packaged in a new way to get you excited about learning. Right, you can dance. Different way to convey the same information, but competing with everything else they're used to on TV. You remember school. If you could go back in the DeLorean, you would go back and say thank you to a lot of great teachers that inspired you, people that were passionate, people that made connections. They built bridges to the information. They listened to what you thought, and they asked you great questions. They inspired you. That's the key. And I learned to sort of create what I was passionate about, to put it through the digital world, to get through to people and let them participate by using your phone. The greatest machine in the history of our civilization is not being used in class. You know, think about that. It's a question of how we use it right. How do we use it correctly? Because we can't beat distractions. You can't beat them by banning phones or banning YouTube or banning Wikipedia. We have to be better than that. Our school system has to be as exciting as everything else that's around us. And this last example, I want to put it all together, all these elements that design curiosity, and leave you with some questions. But it's the way I start my first music history class. The way I reach out to people and show them what I believe. I didn't have any video training again. I just learned to do it one thing at a time, one thing added up. And it starts with a story of how music started 35,000 years ago. Caveman beat here. You can move a little if you want. In 2004, archaeologists discovered a flute in a cave dating back to the Ice Age. And overnight, music history became 10,000 years older. That means that 35,000 years ago, when humans rose and Neanderthals disappeared, we were playing music. Does music matter in the world of machines and gadgets and devices? Why does it light up our brain and make our hair stand up? Why does it affect our heart rate? Why do we need music when we win? Why do we use it to escape? It's older than the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran. It's older than all of them combined. Music has survived in every generation, of every culture, everywhere on the planet. When we're alone, we need music. Life is confusing. We ask music why. Music matters more than ever. It's our logic. It's our ambition. It's our prayers. It's our connection. Only humans create music, because music is human. See you in class.